Good morning. So I know the date is wrong. Today is what? Anybody know the date? 16th. Anybody know when Veterans Day was? Nope. The 11th. Who said the 11th? Ding, 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 ding. So we're a little late for Veterans Day, but we wanted to do this special for you guys because this may be the only time that you'll ever get to meet a World War II veteran. Okay? So what I want to do is we're going to make today a little different than a normal chapel. You guys are going to get an opportunity to ask questions towards the end. So if there's a question that you have or a comment you want to make, we're going to give you that opportunity to do it. What I first want to do is introduce this kid. Anybody know who he is? My son. Who said that one? We got two smart kids in here today. So this is my son, Adam. He is, look at the top, the president and founder of the Honored Legacy Project, okay? So when you guys come in and talk to me about going to college and what's important, it's important to find your passion and pursue it, and that's what he does. So he's a volunteer for the Best Defense Foundation. He accompanied the gentleman you see in the picture, Bob Gibson. Adam escorted him back to Normandy, France on the 78th anniversary of D-Day. That was June 6th. Adam graduated down the road here, not too far at Princeton High School, and it will be a graduate of Westchester University in 2 more years. What I'm going to do is hand this over to him. Adam is going to walk you through the mannequins that you see up here, what they are, why they're wearing what they have on, and be able to explain that to you. And then he's going to introduce our guest of honor. Okay?
Thank you. All right, guys, so I know you might have some questions, so hopefully I can answer them. But this first uniform here, actually both of them represent the time that Ernie was in the war. And Ernie was in the war at the very end, from 1944 to 1945. So this late war uniform, this jacket, is what Ernie wore when he was in combat. And the gear here is what a soldier might have been carrying if he had an M1 carbine, which is a rifle that the Army had at the time, and the sidearm, which was the 1911, something the Army carried if you were an officer. But each soldier you can see on both the displays, wore their steel helmet. Now, this wouldn't stop a bullet or anything, but it would stop shrapnel. And it's definitely years behind the helmets that our Army wears today, which can even stop a bullet. But they wore wool pants, which are really itchy and uncomfortable, and really tight boots. And if you didn't wear your boots all the time or if they got wet, your feet could get what they call trench foot, and they get infected, and you couldn't walk at all. But this represents what a soldier would have worn at the very, very end of World War II. Now over here, this is more specifically geared towards Ernie. Ernie carried a special rifle during the war. It was called the Browning automatic rifle. It had a 20-round magazine. It weighed 20 pounds, and it could fire fully automatic. So Ernie carried that gun for the 3 months that he was in combat. And this is the belt that he would have been wearing, and would carry 240 rounds of ammunition. Roughly, the belt itself would weigh close to 5 to 7 pounds. He'd be wearing a backpack, which you can't really see on the back here, his steel helmet. Now, if it was really cold in the wintertime during what was known as the Battle of the Bulge, Ernie would have been fighting in close to 7 to probably max 4 to 7 feet of snow that they'd be fighting in. It was one of the coldest years on record in Europe. So of course he'd be wearing everything that he can, his long pants, his overcoat, a scarf, just so that he could keep warm when it was about -20, -30 degrees out. So he'd be carrying all this gear, fighting the Germans, and also fighting the weather. So hopefully that answers some of your questions. But this is what each display represents. And so now, without further ado, I'm going to introduce my good friend, Ernest Moger. So Ernie wasn't born too far away from here. He was born in New Brunswick, correct?
Yep, New Brunswick.
So he was drafted in 1944, straight out of high school. So he went from high school right into the Army. He had no choice. He got drafted, went through training, and on Thanksgiving Day of 1944, he went on a boat. There were no planes to take anyone overseas. He went on a boat and left for Europe. He arrived there sometime in December, and his first day of combat was in January of 1945. And he fought through Luxembourg, right into Germany, and in March of 1945, his war ended because Ernie got shot. Ernie was shot by a German sniper, and his wounds were bad enough that he had to get sent back home, and Ernie's war was over.
Yes, it was.
And he was discharged from the Army in 1945, and he is here today. So everyone give a warm welcome to Ernest Monier. So Ernie, I'm just going to ask you a few questions.
Yes.
And then once we're done that, the kids will ask their own questions, all right?
Mm-hmm.
So the first one, you were born in 1926, correct?
That's correct.
So what was it like growing up in North Jersey in the 30s and the 40s?
Well, I graduated from New Brunswick High School. Prior to that, I lived in New Brunswick most of my life. My dad was a baker in New Brunswick, and I was a little boy at the time. And what they did was they used to deliver bread and cake to Piscataway. That was one of the areas that my father would work and deliver bakery stuff. So I was only a kid at that time. And as I was growing up, I was in New Brunswick High School. I played a little basketball in high school, and before I knew it, I graduated from New Brunswick High School, and the war was already existing. We already were at war, and we were fighting in Germany and Japan. We were fighting 2 wars. And when I was in high school, I said to myself, oh, the war will be over. I'll be lucky. I won't have to go. Well, lo and behold, the war was not over. And I was drafted at age 18 years of age. I trained in the United States Army in Camp Landing, Florida. And I was in Camp Landing, excuse me, for about 9 months learning combat. And after I graduated from New Brunswick High School, I was sent to an area where a division, now a division is a lot of soldiers getting ready to go to war. And I was in this division, which was the 76th Division, the 3rd Army. I even have the patch here. That's the 3rd Army, and that's the 76th Division. And I was just one man in a division. And now in the division, I think there's quite a few hundred men. And then we trained as a group, in a division. Then after graduation, we went overseas. Now, our whole division went overseas at one time. And they had these, they called them freighters. And it would take us across the Atlantic Ocean to France, and that's where we got off. We got off in Le Havre, France, the whole boatload. It was our division. And we were billeted. Now, when I say billeted, it means we stayed there. We lived there for a while. And then after that, I found myself in combat with the division. Now, our supreme commander was Blood and Guts Patton. Did you ever hear of Patton, General Patton? Well, all right, yes. He was our commander, and we honored him. And we fought under Patton. Am I carrying? Is that right? Yeah. Okay. Go ahead. And we fought under Patton. We landed. We left Le Havre, France, and we landed in Germany, and we landed at St. Goar on the Rhine River. Now, the Rhine River separated Belgium and Germany. And we were stationed on the Rhine River, which I understand was part of Germany, which I didn't realize all these years. I thought it was Belgium. And Adam here, he's a genius, this young man. He plotted my whole trip, or my combat, From the day I was in the Army, where I left from, where I fought, where I was wounded, and he plotted all that, and we went over it together, and I said, you know, Adam, I've forgotten a lot of this. And you do. That was 76 years ago. I'm 96 years old. And I'm here to tell you about the war. I was wounded, and I'm lucky that I'm still here today. I was wounded when I was 19 years old, and the war was over for me. I went to the hospital in Camp Upton, Long Island, where it's a rehab hospital, rehabilitation. They teach you to try to forget about the war. Well, you never forget about the war. That's always embedded in you. And I was in that hospital for quite a few years. Well, not quite a few years, maybe a year or so. And then I finally got my discharge papers. I got my discharge at the age of, I believe it was 20. I was wounded at 19. I got my discharge at the age of 20. And then I came home, and I was without a job because a lot of the GIs were coming home after the war. And a lot of us did not have a job until we came home. Well, I was lucky, and I found a job with Johnson & Johnson. And I stayed with Johnson & Johnson 35 years, all my life. And I was from New Brunswick, and I worked in Middletown, New Jersey. Johnson & Johnson, the company was personal products. And I started in the shipping department. I worked myself up, and I was finally wound up in research, where I was a senior lab assistant. And I spent many of my years then and there. So in all, I was only in the Army, I was only wounded for about 4 months. I was in combat 4 months when I was pulling what they call guard duty. And we were on the side of a mountain. And a sniper apparently was on the Rhine River itself. There was like a castle, a building on the Rhine River, closer to the German countryside. And I was standing in guard duty there, and apparently a sniper saw me. Now, a sniper is one man who is an expert with a rifle. And he spotted me, and he put his rifle on me. What I mean by is the scope. He scoped me, and he fired one shot. Before I realized anything, it hit me, and it knocked me down. I mean, it knocked me down. I was 19. I weighed about 145 pounds. I carried what they call a BAR, a Browning automatic rifle. This rifle carries 20 rounds, and it was heavy. But you train yourself, to carry that weapon. And after a while, it's not that heavy anymore. Today, if I were to lift that, I would say, oh my God, how did I ever carry that weapon and fight in Germany with that weapon? Well, I did. So I'm going to sum up my story now. I was wounded. I was in Camp Upton, Long Island, rehab. And I remember we were being discharged. And it was a barrack, two-story barrack. And we all lined up in front of our, what do you call it, foot lockers. And this officer would go around and he'd talk to me and talk to the next one, so on and so forth. So I'm standing there in my underwear because the officer, we were all wounded. And the officer came around and he stood in front of me, and he said to me, whoa, ostrich legs. Well, I was skinny. And he made the comment that, oh, ostrich legs. And I said to myself, I don't care. Just get me out of this man's army. So he finally gave me my discharge, and I left the Army, came home to civilian life, got a job with Johnson & Johnson, stayed with them 35 years. And I don't want to go into combat because combat can be frightening to you young people because people do get killed in combat. People do get wounded. Some of us recover. Some of us do not recover. And there's such a thing as PTSD, post-traumatic disorder. And that's like, the war is embedded in you. You remember this, and you never forget it. But there are a lot of aspects in war that you do forget. You can't remember everything. So I've told you just about everything about me. I'm here today, thank God. I'm 96 years old. Hopefully I'll live to see 100. And that's basically my story. Now, is there anyone that would like to ask a question? Maybe I can answer? Yes? Where did I get wounded?
Yeah, or where did the bullet hit you?
Right here in the side. In the groin area.
Is it still there?
Yes, it is. They, excuse me. It's in an area where they're afraid to go deeper and take it all out. Apparently the bullet was in 2 pieces. And the 1 piece is still inside of me. And they removed the other piece only because I was still in the hospital overseas. And I was running a temperature. And I had a fever. And they realized that something is wrong. Well, there was still another piece left in me. And what they did was, I didn't go into surgery. Right then and there, the doctor had an x-ray machine, and he could see the part of the bullet that was still in me. And he said to me, I was awake, he said, I'm going to go dig for that bullet. He said, I've got to get it out because that's why you have an infection. So he did basically operate on me. I was alert. I could remember everything. And he took the bullet out, and then I recovered. Other than that, I'm still up and around. I walk with a limp because I fell and I broke my hip. Now, one of the things with older soldiers like myself, your balance is very bad. And if your balance is bad, you're more susceptible of falling down. And that's why I carry my cane, red, white, and blue. And it helped me a great deal. Now, is there any other questions? Yes? I can't hear you there.
Did men and women get drafted, or was it only men?
Oh, no, men and women were drafted at that time, yes. But women never saw combat in World War II. It was only the men. The women that were in the war were nurses, which we needed. We had the steel helmet. Now, in combat was a cross. I think it was a red cross on it representing a medic. Now, when you were wounded, you would holler, medic, medic. Well, these men would come, if they're in the area where you are, and if they can come to your rescue, they will come to and perform first aid to save your life. And if you're seriously wounded, then what they do is they take you back to battalion aid station. Now, a battalion aid station is where they analyze your wound, how serious it or how not serious it is. If it's serious, then they rush you back to a hospital and they operate on it and save your life. If it's just a scratch, you don't go to the hospital, you go to first aid in the battalion, what have you. They perform first aid on you, they patch you up, and you go back into combat. Well, that didn't happen with me. Mine was serious enough that the war was over for me. I wound up in a hospital, like I said, in New York. I received my discharge in New York, and the war was over for me. The war actually was 8-9 months basic training. Now, basic training builds you up so that you can fight. They give you a weapon, and it was the M1 that I trained with. It's a rifle. very heavy. And I can remember one of the things they taught us, if you dropped your weapon, you would sleep with it. You would eat with it, because that was your life, your rifle. And you just don't drop a rifle. And then after the rifle, I trained with the rifle. I found out I got overseas. They took the rifle away from me. They gave me a BAR, which weighed almost twice as much as a rifle. I weighed about 150 pounds. How I did it, I don't know, but I did. They built up our body so that we could fight. And we all did fight. I want to leave you with one thing, one thought in mind. I made it home, but it's the ones we left behind. And what I mean by left behind, they never came home. I was lucky. So I want to leave you with that. Thank you.
Any other questions, or Adam's got some more for Ernie? Okay, go ahead.
So when someone's wounded, how long does it usually take them to get help?
Almost immediately. If you're in a combat zone, they can't come in and help you immediately, because they'll all get killed, they'll all get shot. As you move along, you're wounded, and you holler, medic, and the medics are right in with the soldiers that are fighting. The medic does not fight. His job is, if you're shot, if you're wounded, to administer first aid for you. And then from there on, they carry you back, and if they have to operate on you, they operate on you. But the medic has a helmet with the Red Cross on it, and they don't fight. They have no weapon. Their only job is to save lives. Any more questions?
Really quickly here. Does anybody here know a medic? A couple people know a medic. Who here knows Pastor McNulty? Guess what he was? A medic. So Pastor McNulty did just that. So Pastor McNulty's old, but he wasn't in World War II. I say that because he's my age. But that job of that medic is done, and Adam, correct me, usually a Marine. Yeah, depends where, but Pastor McNulty, anybody want to know what his nickname was when he was a medic? Anybody got a guess? Every medic got called by the same name, Doc. So when everybody sees Pastor McNulty, or if you have him in class, say, "Hey, Doc," and I guarantee he turns around, all right? Because that was a big part of his life. So it's men like him that risk their lives to save men like Ernie, all right?
So any other questions? Yeah, yep, still the same. Yeah, go ahead.
Did you ever fire your weapon on an enemy soldier?
Did I fire on many people?
Or did you fire your weapon at enemies?
Yes. In combat, our squad, I think the squad is around 10 men. And the enemy was dug in about 100 yards down further. And what we did was that all the 10 men stood up, and we had our rifles at our arms like this, not up here, but here. Now we knew the enemy was there, so we all lined up, and we were given the order of walk and fire. And what we did was, as we advanced, we kept firing our guns. And if the enemy was there, he's going to duck down because those bullets are coming at him. So that's one of the reasons, one of the areas where I find, I was the BAR man, and there was 9 other men, plus another squad, and we all walked forward, firing. So imagine all those bullets coming at you. You're not going to stand up. So the Germans surrendered. We were lucky. We didn't lose any men. They call it line of fire.
What was training like? Was it hard?
Basic training, yes, it was very hard. Before you graduate, you go through an infantry course. Barbed wire, visualize this. I'm by myself and there's other GIs all going through the same area. You have barbed wire. You get down on your hands and knees. This is almost like combat. They're training you for combat now. You're down on your hands and knees, and you have your rifle, and you're crawling under barbed wire or what have you. At the same time, we have not enemy machine guns, but our own men firing above you as you're crawling. You can hear the bullets going over your head. And the reason for that is so that you're trained when you're being fired upon, you get down on the ground on your hands and knees, and if you can see the enemy, you pull up your rifle, lie in prone position on hands and knees, get your rifle, and you fire at the enemy. Any other questions?
Yeah, go ahead. Well, so yeah, that's part of like World War I. But yeah, that's okay. I'll answer it. So
Go
for
ahead.
Ernie, so in World War I, right, you have no man's land, like what you said, is in between like two trenches. So in World War II, there wasn't as much trench warfare. It was more of just like advancing, a lot less like digging in. Digging in, do you ever have to dig a foxhole? Do you want to explain to the kids what a foxhole is?
A foxhole, you're in this area, and rather than just lie on the ground, you were given the order to dig a foxhole. Now, the foxhole is big enough that you can get down into that foxhole, and you can be safe. They can fire bullets at you, but you're in a foxhole. And you do this for a while, and then you get out of the foxhole and you advance. Now, another thing I want to tell you about is, listen to this word, tree burst. Now, a tree burst is when the enemy fires shells at you, not bullets. These are cannons. And you're in a wooded area, and one of the what do you call it? The artillery shell hits a tree, and you're down on the ground. Well, that tree is blown apart, and so is the cannon bullet. Now, what happens is it breaks into many pieces, tiny pieces, and you're on the ground, and that explodes over your head. There's a possibility that some of that shrapnel is going to hit you as you're lying down. It can kill you. It can really seriously wound you. So they call that a tree burst, where the cannon bullet hits a tree, and instead of going up, it comes down on you. And a lot of men were wounded, and a lot of men were killed because of tree bursts.
One more question.
Yes.
About sleeping. I remember you told me a story about the first night you were sleeping and how cold it was that night.
Yes. It was before combat. I think it was a day or 2 days before combat. We had what they call like a sleeping bag. And you'd crawl in that at nighttime. It was cold, it was freezing at night. And you'd crawl into that at nighttime, and you'd take your shoes off so that your feet can get warm. Now, Adam said that if your feet got wet, you would get trench feet. And that was very serious. You can't fight and can't walk on trench feet. You just can't walk. So a sleeping bag, you slept in. In fact, when I slept in my bag, I turned around, I breathed through my mouth to put a little warmth into that sleeping bag, because rather than use my breath, without any help, I would sleep in the, and I'd go, and it would warm up the inside of the bag a little bit. So that was that.
What did you do with your boots?
I put them outside. We weren't in combat at that time. We were billeted in a barn, and could have been my whole squad. And we didn't fire anymore. It was on its way to combat. And we slept in those bags to stay warm. I think they issued those bags prior to combat because it was cold.
Well, I want to close with a couple of things today. I don't know if I need the mic, if you guys can all hear me. But I want to share this with you. Romans 8:28. All things work together for good for those who love God. Now, there's a great story on how I met Ernie, and I don't have time to share that with you, but we've heard Ernie's story and all of the trials and the tribulations that he went through during war. One thing he didn't share with you is, anybody know what this used to be, these buildings were here? Camp Kilmer. You know, Ernie used to ride his bike here as a kid? So there's a connection here. But with all the stuff that Ernie went through, how many can relate? I know no one here, I'm hoping no one's gotten shot here, but who here has struggled with things in their life? Who has stuff that you just go, oh, right? Guess what? If you haven't yet, you will, because we all go through it. We all have things in our lives that come up that is painful or difficult, or are obstacles we have to overcome. I've shared this with Ernie before. I want to share it with you guys now. I am so thankful that Ernie got shot. Wow. Think about that. And it goes back to this, because God had a plan for Ernie, and you know what that plan was? 96 years of age to meet me and my son. And what a blessing Ernie has been to my family. And we would not be here, and Ernie would not be here today had this not happened. Had he not been shot, the story of how I met him and seeing the Purple Heart on his license plate wouldn't have happened. Had the bullet been an inch, or not even, a fraction of an inch, and hit his femoral artery, Ernie wouldn't have made it to the aid station. So what I want to challenge everybody here is, when you think you're going through something really bad, you are. But God's there to help you get through that. And you don't know what your pain and your trials and your tribulations that you're going through today or have gone through, what it's doing for somebody else, and what it may be a benefit to someone else. Once you have experience and you can talk about it, you can help others. And when we know that God has a plan, one of the questions that gets asked all the time, wasn't asked here, is was Ernie afraid? Who here thinks if Ernie was afraid? Yeah. But God had a plan for Ernie, and God has a plan for you guys. So when you think you're down, and when you think you're struggling, or when you think there's no hope, God has a plan for you, and those plans include helping others around you. And it may not be today, it may be 76 years later that you connect with somebody and you change somebody's life. And that's what Ernie's done for my family. So I want to encourage you all here to know that God has a plan for you, that He loves you, the staff and the teachers here love you, and we want what's best for you. And at some point, you're going to be able to share those experiences that you have. Make sense?
I have one more I want to add, which is the most important, and I don't know how I didn't mention it to you guys. But when I was in combat, we were on this hill, and I got down on my knees, and I prayed to God. I really prayed to God. I said, am I going to get killed, God? Am I going to die here? And I got down on my knees, and I prayed to my God. And apparently, He listened to me. Why? I'm still here today. I was wounded, but I lived through it. And that is, I think, the most important bit of when I was in combat. I prayed to my God, and I said, oh, what am I doing here? I'm fighting for my country. I can get killed. Well, I didn't get killed. I was wounded. But again, I would say praying was very important, and praying helped me because I'm here today talking to all of you. Thank you.
So before we head out, I want to pray for you guys. All right, so join me in a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for these Timothy students. Thank you for who they are, what they believe in, and what they stand for. Lord, we just ask that you protect them. Lord, may they never see combat. May they never see war. May they never get injured. May they understand that you are a God that loves them, cares for them, and has a plan for their lives. Lord, even at this age, you have a plan for them. You are calling them and leading them to be your disciples. Lord, I just pray that they listen to you and absorb everything around them that you're preparing them for and that you're teaching them to be. Everything that goes on here at Timothy, Lord, is all a part of who they are and where they're going. And we just pray, Lord, as they do go through struggles in life, that you remind them that you are there walking beside them. You are helping them through that. And there is a purpose that good will come from this. Good always triumphs over evil, Lord, and all the trials and tribulations they may face in their lifetime, it is something that you're in control of and you will have for your plan, bringing them to where you want them to be and impacting the others around them. Lord, I just pray as they leave to go back to class that they will take the message that Ernie talked about here, the stories that they heard, and hold these dear, because this is one of the few generations that can still get this information from a veteran. Lord, I just pray for Ernie, and I just ask you to continue to watch over him and strengthen him, and we are so thankful that you've given him to us 76 years after being wounded, and we're thankful that you heard his prayers, Lord. And we just ask continued blessings, and in your name we pray, amen.